Hello, I'm Tim Gaston, Director of Change Management, and that also includes the release engineering team for HMS. We'll start by going over the agenda briefly. We'll introduce you to HMS initially, and then we'll talk a little bit about the deployment challenges that HMS faced. We'll go into a little bit more detail about the Informatica specific challenges we faced as well. Then we'll talk about the innovative and exciting approach that HMS and CA partnered together on to help resolve those challenges. And then in the end, we'll cover some of the results that came out of that partnership. So who is HMS? HMS essentially works for healthcare payers. We help them contain costs and prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. We generally just help them save money and improve their overall performance. We do that by essentially being experts in healthcare data analytics. So who are those healthcare payers? They really covered a wide array of industries or a wide array of healthcare areas. So for health plan programs, we serve groups like managed care organizations for Medicaid or MCOs. For those of you who don't know, MCOs are essentially commercial insurance carriers that administer benefits on behalf of Medicaid. We also work directly for state Medicaid agencies. That's really the core of HMS's business historically and really still a big part of the business. We also do work directly for federal agencies. The first one on this list is particularly exciting right now. About 3 weeks ago, CMS awarded HMS one of 5 regions as a CMS recovery audit contractor. And that essentially means that we identify and correct Medicare claims that were paid incorrectly, and we're pretty excited about the opportunities that presents. We also work for the VA and the Department of Defense. So for those clients, HMS helps drive results through things like eligibility verification, which essentially just means that we ensure that those receiving benefits are truly eligible for those benefits. As I mentioned with CMS, we help ensure that claims were paid appropriately and correctly by our clients. And along with the Affordable Care Act's introduction, there was a big increase in the amount of fraud detection that was necessary, and our analytics background really helped us in that area. So generally, with those capabilities, we help our clients with cost savings and just performance improvement overall. We actually help them indirectly in other ways as well. We do a lot of provider education to kind of catch those inconsistencies and incorrect payments before they're ever made. So just at a high level, some of the deployment challenges that HMS encountered with our legacy processes include things like very manual release process that was arduous, and it obviously increased the amount of risk for error, things like that. Informatica was a particular problem area. Lionel's going to cover that in a little more detail later. We have a lot of applications that are, they cross between, not distributed, but online and batch systems. They have multiple different technologies involved, and the deployments were very disparate. So it was difficult to package releases for a given application into one cohesive unit. We also accumulated multiple builds across different environments for a single application, and that really added unnecessary maintenance cost and inconsistency across environments. Another issue we ran into is that artifacts were historically just stored in the file system, so if we had to do any research or perform any rollbacks, the information around that was very difficult to extract. So now I'm going to turn things over to Lionel Bailey. He's our lead release engineer at HMS. He's going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the challenges we faced, as well as our partnership with CA to resolve those challenges. So, Lionel.
Thanks, Tim. So some of the Informatica deployment challenges, we had 3 different ways we would actually use Informatica deployments. We tried to use the GUI. When using the GUI, we would automatically inherit at a minimum of an hour wait time to actually deploy code. This can become a strenuous process when you have multiple deployment groups. In our case, we actually had a minimum of 30 deployment groups to deploy every Thursday. So this process started at 10 a.m. and sometimes would finish Friday or even Saturday. This would cause problems with people trying to actually do app checkout, will also cause issues with application stability and even causing mainframe jobs to fail because this code had to be in place before those jobs actually ran. With the XML import and export feature, we noticed that when we started exporting a lot of the things, we ran into workflows not being properly exported. We had versioning that actually never kept in sync with the actual version that it was deploying. And then also, it was not able to actually resolve conflicts effectively. Some of the conflicts would actually resolve, but a lot of the times we had to go back in the back end and actually redeploy the workflow or update the workflow or even update the process behind it. With the Informatica CLI, it is the great feature, great tool, but the problem with that is it's still a manual intervention. So when you're deploying multiple deployment groups, in our case, a minimum of 30, what you're running into is 30 different times you're going to have to change that one script to run the flow or put it into another script to change the target folder, destination folder, the deployment group name, the objects deployed, and the target repository. So when CA and HMS partnered, we wanted to figure out what is the best option and the best way to use the CLI along with the workflow tool that CA Release Automation actually provides for us. When we did get CA Release Automation in-house, there was no predefined actions for Informatica. Excuse me. So CA and HMS worked hand in hand for about a 3 to 4 month engagement to actually come up with action packs specific to our deployment process and streamline our process. Some of the key highlights from this workflow: we have a generic workflow now that actually covers Java, Informatica, and database. By doing this, it's unified our app deployments across multiple technologies and generic enough to work with the common deployment process. We've also worked with CA to minimize our app setup time. In that case, what we prepare now is a application manifest and release manifest. At the time of the slide, that was 2 manifests. That was still a manual intervention. And I'm happy to say in the last 3 weeks, we've actually made that an automated process as well by linking directly to the Workbench database, creating a form inside of that. So now all of the Informatica form data is actually automatically populated to the XML for us. Now there's a pre-promotion workflow as well. With the pre-promotion workflow, we have the build, the CA approval process, the change request process is now tightly coupled. For us, that was a normal of an hour-and-a-half time frame for every deployment. That is now about 15 minutes at best. And with artifact maintenance, we started actually storing all of our artifacts inside the Nexus repository, also being able to link to our Linux file system and stop using mount points on the Linux file system. So as you can see here, this is our app deployment process that came out of our CA engagement. Right now with the process, what we do, we run our pre-promotion plan that links to our Harvest database, also links to ServiceNow database, grabs the information to make sure it's fully approved on both sides, the package is fully approved, promotes the artifact, promotes the package, and builds the artifact ahead of time so we can actually send the artifact ahead of time to the app dev team to verify the application before we actually deploy it at 7 o'clock that night. They execute the SQL process that you see all the way at the bottom in the orange where it says manual workflow. It is a manual workflow from our side, but it is still an automated process. We're working with our database team at this time to get that also put into our release automation workflow so we can fully deploy everything for that one particular application within 10 to 15 minutes. This is just a high-level workflow of what it looks like inside of release automation. So our results. In the efficiency category, baseline before CA release automation was 7 hours to do a deployment. We average now of 3 hours. Number of deployments for scripts, we have for every one application, 7 scripts, 3 property files. That has been completely reduced to just 80 deployment scripts, and that's it. Average time to deploy a single Java application, 23 minutes, is now down to 10 minutes. Time to stage deployment for a database used to be 1.5 hours. It is now a 30-minute process. And I think, Nikhil, we've actually reduced that down to 10 minutes now. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. So our time to create the weekly harvest package approval report was a 45-minute process. It's now a 5-minute process. On the quality side of things, we validate the number of packages and the names of the packages automated. It's a fully automated process. We verify all approvals and dependencies, builds and releases, and we have more visibility into our deployment log reporting. So, is there any questions?
So you said that your Informatica should take you hours and hours and hours. It's going to vary by day, but what is your time frame that it's shrunk it down to as a whole? You know, is there any kind of...
As a whole, we're at...
Repeat the question.
So, for those who didn't hear, the question was, for deployments for Informatica, how much shrinkage did we have in time frame, since it used to take multiple hours? The standard time we start now is 7 p.m. to start doing Informatica deployments, and we're done normally about 9 o'clock with at least 45 deployment groups. So
It used to go into the next morning.
that used to take 12 to 15 hours. Sometimes it actually took 36 hours. It depended on what was going on in the database, the size of the folder, the contents of that folder. So regardless of the folder size now, we still can deploy to that same folder within minutes.
Most importantly, it's predictable. Before, it may be a few hours, it may be all night, you never know.
Any other questions? Great. So some of the recommended sessions, there's this next session is going to be on the floor. GM Financial builds a sustainable, holistic, continuous delivery practice, and it starts at 4:30. And some of the must-see demos, these demos will end today, I believe, at 5 o'clock. That is correct, okay. Modernize app delivery, deliver better apps, orchestrate your release, deliver test data faster. Thank you.